Hello, welcome to the Football and Feelings podcast. Not much football chat today, really, but I got to speak to the ever so charming Jake Tyler, who circumnavigated the UK a few years ago on foot, not only to improve his own mental health, but to spread awareness as well. He went on to do a TEDx Talk, which done very well online, and he knows it as well, he knows it. And also was on Mind Over Marathon, a BBC One documentary a few years ago, which was endorsed by the Royals, I do believe. But a really fun episode. I'll post his social media links in the description, as well as ours, so give us a follow. And give us a rating as well if you're listening on Apple. Let us know what you think. Cheers. Okay, so obviously, due to the coronavirus, tensions have been pretty high for everyone.
Yeah.
There's a lot of anxiety. How long are we going to be locked down for? What will humanity be like after all this is over? Will this finally be the thing that gets Oasis back together? I mean, no one really knows. But how are you coping? How are you getting on?
I'm all right, mate. It could be a lot worse. I'm at my girlfriend's mum's place near Derby, and it's on a very middle class estate with a nice big garden. And there's an Aldi 10 minutes walk away. So I'm laughing.
Stuff.
It's boring. It's really boring. I used to be the kind of person that could just sit around and do nothing all the time, but like the last couple of years, I've tried to become more of a, just be a bit more proactive with my time, I guess. And now, just when I was getting into the sweet spot of that, I've been thrown back into laziness. But no, I mean,
because this cut a trip short, didn't it?
Yeah, it cut my trip short. So I was in Cambodia for a couple of months, and then Malaysia for a couple of months, just with my girlfriend. And yeah, we were really enjoying it out there. Actually, really sort of taking our time. Not trying to dot around and see a million different places in a short space of time. We really wanted to drink in the culture and the country we were in. So we spent 2 months in each country rather than going all around Asia. And the plan was to carry on doing that until the money ran out. But obviously this whole thing happened, and then we came back and like, shit, we've only seen 2 countries. But it's the thing is that I think everyone has to remember is that everyone's hand's been forced here. Everyone's plans have had to take a back seat, and this was never part of our plan. The travel plan has a pin in it at the moment, and the new plan is ride out the current situation, which everyone's doing. So, and my situation could be far worse, and I'm sure I know there's many people who've got it a lot worse than I have.
Yeah. So you were in Kuala Lumpur when you had to come home, right?
Yeah. What
was the situation like there?
It was fine until, it seemed like, because we were keeping abreast of what was happening back here, and it actually seemed like things were kicking off worse here, like the amount of cases and deaths and just general panic amongst the population. And in Malaysia, it all seemed very sort of business as usual. There wasn't an awful lot to talk about it. We were keeping abreast of the news there as well, obviously. But basically, while we were in Kuala Lumpur, there was this big religious event at one of the mosques, and there was about 16,000 people in the congregation. And that's how coronavirus made Malaysia the number 2 country in Kuala Lumpur at that time we were there. So basically, you've got 16,000 people who came from all over the country to this big Muslim event. And then once the event was over, they just dispersed around the country. And basically the government had to track down basically everyone who went there, and they found out that about 700 people in there had coronavirus, and it's just swimming around this 20,000 people congregation. Yeah, and now Malaysia's the second biggest hit place in the Far East. So that all happened while we were in Kuala Lumpur. So we went from it being really seeing the country how it is to all of a sudden overnight they put in a movement control order. We got kicked out of our hotel at an hour's notice. We got all set up and everything, and then we got a knock on the door saying you got to get out, everything's closed. So we instinctively went to the airport just to see, I don't know why, we didn't want to go obviously, but we wanted to see like what was happening there. So we slept in the airport overnight. and thought about it the next day and thought, okay, if there's anywhere still open, any guest houses or anything, let's stay there and see what happens. So we stayed somewhere for a couple of nights. But in the end, you know, the streets just cleared. I mean, Kuala Lumpur is a really vibrant city. And in those 2 days, we saw it turn into, you know, sort of a post-apocalyptic scene, you know. And the thing is, that's kind of how it's turned into over here. But we have the luxury and the privilege of being citizens of this country here. Whereas over there, you know, we didn't have, you know, if things got sticky or ugly, then we wouldn't have had anyone to have our backs or anything, would we? So with a heavy heart, we had to cut the trip short. And it was actually quite interesting to see what's been happening in the world develop in two different countries. You know, in Malaysia, people seem to be a lot more compliant with what the government was requesting, whereas over here, I think there's a little bit more entitlement and a little bit more, well, you know, why should I? So it's been interesting to see how both sort of play out, really.
There's been an awful lot of
weird time.
Oh, I know. Yeah, there's been an awful lot of coronavirus can't stop me doing what I want to do over here. That sort of vibe.
It's very irresponsible. And I tell you what, as well, actually, you know, there are people who are literally starving to death. No, there's literally people who are in council flats and, you know, all bunched in, you know, 5 or 6 in a flat, who don't have any outside area, who have been told to stay inside. And these people actually do need, you know, time outside, etc. And you've got the people who are just entitled and who just want, who don't want the coronavirus to stop them being social and everything, kind of ruining it for the people who actually need some outdoor space. Like in London, they've closed Hyde Park and they've closed a few of the big parks and stuff because certain people are going out and flaunting the, you know, and disobeying the rules, which messes it up for people who actually really need an outdoor space. People who've been cooped up in a tiny space for weeks and weeks on end. You know, it's an immensely complex situation with lots of moving parts, and you know, thank God we've got social media for everyone to have an opinion on it all, because where would we be without all that, eh?
Exactly. I mean, it's just such a great thing that everyone has an equally valid opinion.
I absolutely love it.
The mums of WhatsApp University have been out in full force as well, spreading all the rumours possible.
Yeah.
Also, I would just like to add for the listener, I didn't chuckle. I didn't chuckle then because we were talking about people starving. There was a David Brentism in there. Just wanted to point that out. Full disclosure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a similar situation for me. I was studying in Budapest actually at the time when this all kicked off. I was only there for like 6 weeks before I came home, and yeah, it was almost overnight. It went from one day, my university was going to be open as normal. Everyone was going to be staying. And then the next day, no, government have changed it. No one's allowed out past a certain time. Elderly people were allowed to go shopping before 12, and they were told to stay inside if not. So yeah. Unbelievably quick.
It's crazy. It's a crazy time. And weirdly, you know, if you are, I mean, as I said, I've got it pretty tucked up here. You know, I'm in a sort of relatively sort of middle class environment with a garden, and it's a quiet neighborhood and everything. And the weather's nice. And so when you're sitting in the garden, it's like the scale of what this is can elude you at times, because it is huge. Obviously, this is a huge event in human history, in modern human history. But because buildings aren't on fire, and because there isn't people screaming in the street and stuff, if you are just sitting in the garden and just letting the time go by, it's very easy to convince yourself that there's nothing really going on. So you know, I'm
nice in a way.
Yeah,
but
well,
also it's a bit worrying.
I think so. I mean, saying things like we're all in this together is something that I can't with good conscience really say, because of, you know, the situations that a lot of people are in. You know, I'm just sort of sitting in bed eating cake, and other people are, you know, boxed into a tiny flat and don't have any outdoor space and are overworked if they're key workers and are now dying, obviously, and bereaved. And, you know, there's some really horrible stuff going on. And although everybody's life has sort of been turned upside, well, not turned upside down, but it's just everyone's life's been put on pause, hasn't it? Really, it's I'm doing my best not to feel too aggrieved at the situation, because it's my personal situation. I mean, because I've actually got it a lot easier than many people. So I don't want to say I'm enjoying it as such, as you know. I'm sure many people aren't, but you know, it could be a lot worse for me.
Yeah, and that's good. You have to keep that perspective as well. Otherwise, you can get lost in it, and that's when you become a bit of a bigot, like we were saying. Like, oh no, there's nothing wrong. It's fine. I'm just gonna go to the park and get the Strong Guy Dark Fruits out. But anyway, moving on from there. I'm happy that I was able to get you onto the podcast after.
Thanks for inviting me, mate. Yeah, no, it was, obviously after
I slid into those DMs.
Yeah, very expertly done. Well, I've not been asked to do a podcast for a while. I've sort of had some brief, not fame, but sort of brief attention a couple of years ago, and I'm very much yesterday's news now. So it was actually quite flattering to get an invite onto a podcast.
Well, let's bring you back to today's news, shall we? Let's give it a go. I mean, obviously, I mentioned your TEDx talk was quite a big inspiration for me, because at the time I watched it, I was not feeling too good, and in sort of true millennial fashion, I went to the internet instantly, and I thought, there's going to be an instant fix. So I was probably typing things in like how to not be depressed and, you know, enter this competition to become carefree, all that sort of vibe. But I really liked your ability to talk about such deep issues in a way that was actually quite entertaining. And it made me realise that that even when I do feel awful, I don't have to lose my sense of humour completely.
No, I think it's really. I think if you're that sort of person, I think it's really important not to. You know, it's a nebulous talking about mental health. There's no rules to it, and I think the thing I noticed, because I became quite immersed in that whole world through doing my walk around the country, obviously, to doing a TV program, to doing that TED talk and everything. You know, I was talking to a lot of people within that sort of mental health space, and the thing I was noticing most about it was I wasn't really identifying with the language that people were using a lot of the time. It felt a little, you know, it was very kind and considerate, but for me it was bordering on a sort of almost mothering tone, and there was no humour to it, and there was no it was no real sort of relatability to me, other than, of course, you know, what people were describing. And you can argue that to talk about mental health is a really serious subject and it shouldn't be laughed about, but I think if you're a naturally self-deprecating person and you've grown up and with friends who take the piss out of each other and that sort of thing, I think it's really important to incorporate who you are in your language when you're talking about mental health. And I wasn't seeing an awful lot of it. So I feel like with my TED talk, I really tried to push that. You know, I tried to be funny. I mean, it came very naturally to me, obviously. Funny guy, can't be helped. But
born entertainer.
I did. But there's a balance, isn't there? And actually, I think it's a really good balance. I think people become more perceptive to subject matter when it isn't all, you know, let's all sit down and face the chairs into the middle and turn the TV off and talk very earnestly for a little while about something. You know, people, you know, when I'm feeling really shitty, the last thing I want to do is talk really seriously about it. I'd rather someone make me laugh, and just in that moment I can sort of relax a little and I can go, oh, do you know what, it really isn't that bad, or I mean, you know, this is just for me. You know, there's people out there with far bigger, more difficult to deal with mental health problems than I. But, you know, I suppose, yeah, I don't know. I just I think there's a space for that. I think there's a space for being able to talk about it while not sort of compromising a sort of jokey nature or something. I'm not sure. That's kind of why I really wanted to talk to you, man, because it sounds like this is your whole approach as well.
Yeah, so the idea sort of came in the same way that people talk about football in a variety of different fashions. There's no linear way of talking about it. If you want to talk about the philosophy of it and like the strategy and like the more formal side, you can. If you want to talk about the emotional side of football, you can. If you want to joke about players falling over and getting false red cards, then you can. And that's sort of what I want to try and translate into mental health as well. Because
I think it makes it more accessible to the people, to the people who need it, which is everybody. It's the buzz phrases and stuff like, it's okay not to be okay and that kind of stuff. Yeah, it can speak to some people on some level, but to someone like me, it didn't take long for that kind of wording to seem a bit trite and a bit, hello, yes, oh, it's fine, don't do you know what I mean? Like, I'd much rather hear someone sort of keep it real,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes when you're feeling at your lowest, talking about it in a way that makes you seem like you're not a human, for me, just didn't work. It made me feel lower. Whereas, like you said, if I was able to joke about it with a select group of people, and I need to point out, obviously, not everyone can do that, and that's fine.
No. It's more about. It's not about being funny with it, and that's going to be a good way for you to deal with it. Because if you're not that way inclined, if you haven't grown up with a mum who's taken the piss out of you constantly and fat shamed you all your life, and friends around you who would rather keep you out and get you more drunk than you need to be and have a big laugh about it the next day, then that's an approach. I've got a mate who I've been thinking more and more about this in the last couple of years. It's almost why I sort of completely stepped away from the mental health space in some ways. I'm nowhere near as active on social media as I was, because I thought I was in danger of annoying people, whose approaches work for them, who are very, who believe that, like, kind of outwardly kind and earnest and supportive messages that are that are arguably kind of one-dimensional, if for me,
like they're reading from a script.
Would maybe take slight issue with, taking the piss out of myself and using words that within the mental health space, I've heard people say, you can't really say that anymore. It's like, well, it's kind of funny if you say it in this sort of way. And a friend of mine, he takes the piss mercilessly out of me for being the face of depression, and he thinks that I should have he said he wants me to bring out a perfume called Depression Pour Homme with a little razor blade at the bottom of the bottle, like how there's a worm at the bottom of a bottle of tequila. Do you know what I mean? That you've got your head in your hand straight away, but it absolutely floored me. And if it's done with love, and if you trust the intentions of the person who's being like that with you, that's what's important. I'm sure there's many people who would find that unbelievably offensive, but the fact that it came from a guy who I've known for 10 years and who's had my back many times, and who's who's unbelievably loyal and a great friend to me, then that on that day when he actually said that when I was in a really bad place, and it absolutely floored me, and it brought me out of the funk that I was about to fall into. And you can't, if something can have that effect on someone who goes through really, really, fucking awful thoughts sometimes, which I do, you can't really argue with it, I don't think. You can choose not to put it out there in case it offends other people, obviously, but to take it off the table completely is backwards for me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay, well, let's crack onto your story then. So people may know you from Mind Over Marathon, which was on BBC. Was it like 3 years ago?
About 3 years. Did you watch it?
I didn't, which is annoying because it's
Yeah.
also not available on iPlayer or anything like
No,
that.
it's not. It's not anywhere. I keep trying to find it somewhere, but
Yeah,
it's
you're checking every day just to
yeah.
see
Yeah,
see
when I
if it's
do the
back
TED
up.
talk, when I have a look and see the TED talk views and stuff, I spend about half an hour every day just seeing who's been on what and how many more views of stuff I've had. So yeah, and I masturbate while
So
I do it.
love me.
Um,
Okay,
but
so anyway,
go on, mate.
oh
Sorry,
fuck, I don't know how to bring you
D-Ray.
back from that.
Sorry, I've derailed it. Sorry, yeah. So you were saying what a brilliant job I did in Mind Over Marathon.
That's it. Yes, but
Yeah.
obviously prior to that, you was on you was you was in the midst of an enormous challenge in itself, weren't you? When you got picked up for that show, I don't
Yeah.
really want to do it an injustice by explaining it. So,
So you're
if
gonna
you'd
make
like
me
to
tell it
take the
for
reins,
the
that's
millionth
exactly
time.
what I'm going to do.
Okay.
Easier for me, really.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you want? I suppose it's best to just do the whole story in it. Okay. So I was working in London. I was running a bar in East London for about a year, and at that time I'd been struggling with my mental health for a long time. Although at that time I wouldn't have actually worded it like that. I don't think, because mental health isn't something that I've really given any thought to. I'd noticed a pattern of behaviours and thoughts in myself over like my adult years, which I thought were completely my own, and was something that I didn't see anyone else really dealing with, and is something I dealt with by sort of abusing drugs and booze and sort of just, I don't know, just very, very bad life choices. And in the end, I ended up with a mild substance abuse problem and suicidal ideation, which lasted maybe for sort of a couple of weeks. And in the end, it got to a point where I actually was going to take my own life. So I somehow managed to get out of it, but just by speaking to my mum initially, which sort of bought me a day, and then she got me into therapy, and then in the end I got signed off work because I was so ill, and I just had this kind of I just lost who I was. Basically, I just completely lost my way. I didn't think I had any personality left, didn't have anything at all, and spent a few sort of weeks licking my wounds at home. And then I can't remember whose idea it was. Probably my mum's actually. She was like, "Well, you've got to do something with your days. So like, go out and take the dog for a walk once a day. Just I felt like I wasn't in control of any of my emotions at the time. So I wanted to give myself something that I was in control of. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. That'll be my little job every day. I'll get myself off the sofa and I'll go out and do that.
Mm.
So I take the dog for a walk every day, and sort of over the coming weeks, I start to feel better, and I put an awful lot of it down to just sort of being outside, being immersed in nature, and sort of moving my body and just breathing in fresh air, just all that great stuff you get from a long walk, I suppose. And because I noticed a real shift in my mental health after a point that I thought I was completely broken, and there was going to be no returning from that. I was just sort of amazed at it, really, and thought, wow, like, how can it be this effective? Because obviously when I went into therapy, I'd learned a lot about depression and that sort of thing, and I sort of looked it all up in my own time, and I was becoming more sort of familiar with what it was all about and all that kind of stuff. And nowhere anywhere was where I was reading was saying, go and take the dog for a walk an hour a day, and that will sort you right out. But it was me, and I just thought, I don't know, it was a weird sort of brainwave / epiphany that just sort of fell out of the sky, really. And it was to stay outside, immersed in nature, but to incorporate it in some kind of fundraising challenge type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about what I could do. Running marathon was one of the things I thought I could do. do a big hike, you know, through the South Downs or something like that. But for some reason, I was just thinking really, really grand, really, really big, something that could really sort of capture people's imaginations. So in the end, I decided that I would sort of try and exhibit the most naturally beautiful parts of Britain, and in a way to try and encourage other people to go outside and go walking and try and use what I'd used to sort of manage their mental health as well. So I decided to walk around Britain via every national park. So I just sort of circled them all on the map and just put a line through, you know, what it was, and then just all of a sudden there was this kind of big loop from Brighton to Brighton that incorporated 7, 8, 9, I can't remember now, national parks, and that was that. And you know, I wasn't working at the time, and so I was having the irony of having like a really grand, sort of ridiculous idea when I started to feel better wasn't really lost on me, and I didn't really tell anyone about it for a while because I thought, you know, people would take the piss out of me and just kind of, because it's not who I am really. I'm not an adventure athlete by nature, you know. I don't do any of that. You know, I was a big drinker, big smoker, big sort of party type of vibe, so yeah, so it was a weird one. It was a really weird one, but I knew deep down that it was something I really had to do, and something I really believed was going to be a sort of turning point in my life and be beneficial to others. So I planned it meticulously, and in the end told everyone about it, which is the perfect thing to do if you don't want to give yourself enough thinking space to talk yourself out of a grand idea. Just start telling people I was doing it. Sort of made it happen. And then a couple of months after that, after I'd done a bit of crowdfunding and sort of got myself in relatively good shape and bought all the gear and everything, I went down to Brighton and started walking west towards southwest England. And yeah, to cut a long story short, it took me 6 months to walk the first half, and then because I was I sort of trying to I was sort of putting out, what's the fucking word? I was just showing people what I was doing on social media. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was broadcasting like the whole thing, you know, with a few, you know, using it as a platform to finally start talking about my mental health, and it was getting, you know, some traction, and it really seemed to be kind of inspiring people. And then after that first 6 months, I got approached by the BBC, who asked me if I wanted to do this documentary about mental health, in which I would join a group of 9 other people, and run London Marathon together with under the guise of, you know, exercise is good for your mental health. And then once, you know, so 6 months of filming, and then we ran the London Marathon. And then I got back to the walk, and I did the second half of the walk. And thankfully by that time, obviously being on the BBC, you know, I managed to amass a bit of a bigger following. And then from there, the walk sort of took this new unexpected turn where it became less about myself and more about people, and how talking, and how everyone had a story, and like I was staying with people a lot more. People wanted to put me up. People were recognizing me and buying me meals and stuff, and they wanted to talk to me more about my mental health and theirs. And it just made me realize what a huge, hugely common thing this is. You know, if struggles with mental health doesn't affect you directly, it affects you indirectly. You know, the amount of people that would say, you know, my son's going through this, or my mum went through this, or, you know, my father committed suicide. You know, it was all, every day I was having these conversations in that second half of the walk, when people sort of recognizing who I was. And so, the second half turned into this, I don't know, it just sort of turned into this, a look at Britain, you know, the people of Britain, and hearing people's stories. And oh God, it feels so long ago now. But I mean, you know,
So
go on.
So you were staying at different people's houses every night. How were
Well, the
you?
first half, I was in my tent the first half. I was just sleeping in a tent, and I would walk 15, 20 miles and then set up a tent and sleep there and then pack it all day the next day and carry on, which I really enjoyed. But, once the novelty wore off, it was just, I kind of just felt like an organised homeless person. It was a bit, that existence in itself, as much as I believed in what I was doing, was kind of like depressing. After a while. But the second half, I actually decided to, because of like the program I'd done and because it kind of awoke this passion that I still have for running, I wanted to run at least a section of this route around Britain. So when I got down to Edinburgh, I actually sent my pack home that had all my tent, sleeping bag, everything in it, and decided to run from Edinburgh to Brighton, to the final 700 miles. And obviously, because I didn't have my tent or anything, I would have to stay with people along the way. So at the start of the week, I put out on social media, these are the towns I'm going to be running through. If anyone knows anyone who would be willing to put up a total stranger who's doing this thing, then get in touch.
Let us know if you want to put up this organised homeless person.
Sure,
exactly.
He'll be I haven't got anything. I've got nothing to offer you. So, and I really smell as well. So, no, but I mean, it was amazing. I kind of did a dry run when I got up to Inverness. I ran from Inverness to John O'Groats. This is while I was still hiking, and that took me 5 days. And I thought, I'll do that. I'll put on social media, like, I'm going to be running this route right up to the top of Scotland, and it's so remote up there. I thought, if I can get a place to stay each night in those 5 days, anything south of Edinburgh should be an absolute piece of piss. So I did that, and within a couple of hours, I'd got places to stay all along there. I stayed with some really amazing people, some real eccentrics, so that part of the country.
I was going to say, you're obviously... Go on.
I was going to say, I was staying with this guy called Charlie Chaplin, genuinely, in the Highlands, in a place called Tain, and he lived in this farmhouse. He was an artist, and he he had all this art all over the house and stuff, and he had a mannequin in every single room in the house, and all the mannequins had names. Yeah, very, very, very bizarre. And he had the big grow room, grew loads of weed. He had this big grow room upstairs, and it was like he came and picked me up, and because he gave me his postcode, but it was like I had to go through a field and it was dark by the time I got there, so I called him up. I was like, "Oh, I'm ready to be picked up." And he came up, and I got in his car. And he was like, "Yeah, you're right, mate. Yeah, I'll be with you. I'll be fine in a minute. I've just had a couple of buckets when I went home, but I'll be right with you when we get in." He was just completely out of it. And we got back to his, and he was like, "Do you want to have a split?" I was like, "Yeah, I think I do." And I had a massive whitey in this guy's house, and then went up to the room I was staying in and got in the bed, and I looked around to see where the mannequin was in that room, and there wasn't one in there, thankfully. And I sort of lay down and put the thing on, and I sort of looked in the corner and I was like, "Oh, fuck." And it was there. It was like a kind of sitting down mannequin like that he'd angled towards the bed. This woman was sitting there looking like that. Really horrible. But no, it was really amazing, like those 5 days running up to John O'Groats. And then, so when I got down to Edinburgh, I just thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. Because, as weird as everyone was, not weird, but as interesting as everyone was along there, the language people were using around mental health and the fact that everyone had something to say about it was really interesting. So, the amount of people that I stayed with in those 5 weeks could easily constitute a sample size of the whole nation, really. And out of the thread that everyone had, was that they'd all been through something or knew someone who'd been through something. And that kind of conversation, you stop thinking about whether you're above or below these people in society. It's one of those conversations that just seems to level the playing field. And I found it so interesting. And so after in February 2018, I got back to Brighton after running from Edinburgh, and that was it. And I did my TED talk halfway through the walk as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was at the end.
No. So I did it while I was in. I actually couldn't have been further away from Brighton. So I did my TED talk at the Dome in Brighton, and I was in Inverness, which is the highest city in Britain. And I got, because I didn't have any money, you know, I was on such a tight budget. I had to get the National Express, which took 17 hours on on a coach to get down to Brighton. Got down there, did the TED talk, you know, Brighton Dome with 2,000 people there, and then when it was done, got the National Express back up and carried on with the walk. It was a really bizarre time.
Wow. Sorry, I'll say it again. Before we get onto the TED Talk, whilst you were on the walk, as you said, you met some interesting individuals. Was there many points where you found yourself in a situation and you thought, fucking hell, this is ridiculous? Or was it relatively smooth?
Every few days. To be fair, like for the most part, it was relatively smooth, but it would all depend on what sort of mood I was in, really. You know, if I was in a situation that I found quite strange and I was in a bad mood, I would think, what the fuck is my life? What the fuck am I doing out here? I don't know this person. Whose couch is this? I don't know. But if I was in a good mood, I would be thinking about the same sorts of things, but in a kind of, you know, wow, I'm really living my life kind of way, which is really interesting in itself, actually. You know, I always thought about the same types of things. It's just my perspective on what those things were changed with my mood. And as with many things that I sort of realized while I was out there, that being one of them, a lot of it comes down to perception. You know, we think about the same things a lot. You know, we think about ourselves, we think about our situations and our environments and everything. But, you know, how we're feeling in ourselves at the time dictates how we view those things in our lives and the things we view about ourselves and that sort of thing. So although I never really ran into any kind of big problems, which you can say is a fucking miracle, really, for like spending a year walking around the country, there were definitely times where I felt like, this is, you know, I'm in my 30s now, and I really I don't have a job, I don't have anything. I'm just walking with a fucking rucksack on around. I haven't had a shower in 7 days. What am I doing? And sometimes that would get on top of me a little bit, because I sort of feel like, you know, I should be worrying about a career now. Surely I should be. And then, you know, on a day where I was feeling good, you know, I'd feel slightly superior to people who were kind of on a career trajectory and were buying houses and stuff, and just think, wow, you suckers, like you are just being. And I'm out here in the wide open world. Very interesting, you know. So I was always thinking about the same sorts of things. It's just my perspective would change a lot. But no, in terms of, you know, sticky situations, etc. It was relatively plain sailing. I mean, even down to the weather, I got incredibly lucky for most of the time. You know, there was a few times where, you know, in fact, the times where I really, really didn't like doing what I was doing were the days when the weather was bad. So walking all day and getting absolutely soaked through, trying to set up a tent in the rain when you're soaked, and trying to keep the inside of your tent dry is virtually impossible. So sleeping in a damp, wet tent in damp, wet clothes, and then waking up the next morning and putting damp, wet clothes back on to start walking again. I mean, those days were really tough. But no, in terms of, I mean, I suppose, you know, I'm privileged in many ways. You know, I'm a 6 foot man, a 6 foot white man. So I mean, I didn't run into anything other than kind of kindness and trustworthy. I feel like I was a sort of trustworthy person who wasn't really going to run into any problems or be taken advantage of in any way. I remember I was walking in Wales. I was walking the Pembrokeshire Coastal Path, and I bumped into this girl who was walking the Pembrokeshire Coastal Path for charity. It was like 186 miles or whatever. And I was just chatting to her and just saying, you know, this is a fucking amazing lifestyle, isn't it? You know, you just walk all this way in the day and you set up your tent and it's brilliant. And then you work. She was like, well, yeah, but you're a man. I'm a woman. If I walk for 15 miles a day and I set my tent up, and then all of a sudden a man walks past walking his dog, I then have to pack my tent up and go and camp somewhere else. I was like, fuck, yeah, I didn't even think about that. So in many ways, I was, I'm the ideal candidate to do something like that, and as a result, I feel like I was never really going to run into that much trouble. But I don't know why I did. By law of averages, I should have run into more trouble than I did. But
Hmm.
I feel like I was putting out enough positivity and doing it for a good enough reason, and being able to reason with myself my reasons for doing it often enough. The trouble that I ran into and the dark days I had really didn't matter much compared to the to the good I felt like I was doing myself, and by proxy others as
Yeah.
well. So yeah, on the whole, I'd say I was pretty free of any kind of sort of tough situations and stuff, really, which is mad to think, really, living in a
Mm.
tent for a year.
Yeah.
Mad.
But it is that it's such tiny things that change your perspective on everything, really, isn't it? Such as
Yeah.
you could get an hour's less sleep, and the next day your attitude towards something that you loved previously can change completely. Did
Mm.
you find that was like a big factor? As you said, your mood was changing quite a lot. Did you learn about how your mood changed and how that would affect you?
Yeah, I suppose so. I think I learned that feeling stupid, feeling like I'd done something idiotic while I was out there was a kind of shortcut to frustration, which
Mm.
I would then turn inward onto myself with no one to sort of direct it at, and that would turn into a depressed feeling later on in the day. And I think a lot of that comes down to not feeling like I don't know, like I'm put together well, like my decision making should be good, because I feel like I have a certain level of intelligence, and
Yeah.
I should be able to figure these things out. Why am I making these big mistakes and stuff? And what does that say about me? And and just do what everyone does, basically. It makes me a crap person that I made that big mistake. And the
Mm.
fact that I did a few of those a few times, because I just had nothing to do but to think about the decisions that I had made and was making throughout the rest of the day. I was able to unpack them in a way that I was unable to before. I mean, I knew I'd learn a bit about myself while I was away, but I never thought I'd be, it would be on that sort of level where I was every day. I'd sort of crack myself open and spill myself out and
Mm.
examine everything. Um, and as a result, I feel like I do know myself a lot more than as a person. And I'd say, if anything, like the thing that's changed in me the most since doing the walk is that I contemplate my reactions to things before I react to them now.
Mhm.
I slow the process right down. If I feel like if something happens that's annoyed me or pissed me off or made me sad or whatever, rather than just feel the feeling and run away with that, spend the day in bed or have a go at someone or whatever, I will think, right, okay, why has that bothered me?
Mm.
Really, why has that bothered me? I mean, here's a good example, like getting on the bus. This is about a year ago. I got on the bus and the driver was just very, very rude, as a lot of them are, and I've been rude to before a lot of times, and
Yeah.
and it's never really bothered me. But this time, the guy, I don't think he really did much, but it really, really pissed me off. And I felt about saying something, and I just thought, okay, just hang on a minute. And I went and sat down, and I thought, right, okay, why did he bother? Why did that bother me so much? On a different day, that wouldn't have bothered me. Why? And and I kind of put it down to in that morning, a few things that had happened that had kind of made me feel like I wasn't really in control of my life, and that I was a crap bloke, and this sort of thing, and that I didn't really know what I was doing with myself. And then all of a sudden something happened where someone pushed me over into a kind of big emotion that was about to get away from me, and that would have been that. I would have been
Mm.
in a confrontational situation, or I would have been in a situation where I was not in control of my emotions or whatever, and to give myself that mental space just for a couple of seconds to really think about why I was reacting the way I was reacting, brought me back down. It didn't just like kind of, it wasn't like counting backwards from 5 when you're angry. It was more okay, I'm not annoyed at this guy. I'm annoyed at myself because of how I reacted to these other things that happened in my morning. And I never used to do that. I always used to kind of just either push it down, whatever feeling I was having, or blurt it out, whatever, and never really contemplate why I was feeling how I was feeling. And so being mindful of the process of emotionally reacting to things, and unpacking it in a way, in that sort of way, was the main thing that I learned about myself by being away, for sure.
Is that something that you've stuck with? Because I know for me, when I go for a walk, that is, if I go for a walk in like a naturist space, is naturist a word? It is now.
That's when you walk around naked, isn't it? Naturist. A
naturist, or a natural space. Yeah, we'll go with
naturist colony that I kind of go to.
Yeah, really they love me there.
Yeah,
absolutely love me. That's when I noticed that I have to. That's when I remind myself that I am not always my thoughts. So you can have thought. You're able to detach yourself from it. And now, thanks to that, my inner dialogue is quite it's quite constructive. I can sort of dumb down that part of my brain. But
that's good, man. So
is that something that you've carried on?
I mean, you must have. I mean, I'm assuming here, obviously, but you must have kind of gone through, or have continued to go through something yourself to set this podcast up in general. Have you? Have you managed to, by talking to people and being more open, have you managed to kind of start deconstructing your thoughts a little more?
Oh, massively. Yeah, massively.
And do you think that's helped?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. And seeing how other people deal with their issues, that's been important, but also I'm very aware that I can quite easily grab onto like a bit of a fad. So if someone says, oh, well, like you said, I count down from 5 and that helps me, I'll be like, oh yeah, that'll work for me now as well. But now I've sort of learned that that's not how it works. It's never linear. I'm now my self-talk. I'm able to get myself out of most situations that I get myself into internally, which has been the biggest gift I could have gained from this.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
And do you think that's, how much of that do you put down to just establishing an open dialogue?
Yeah, I'd say a large part of it. Yeah, definitely. But I don't always want to talk about it. Like, I don't really talk about these sort of things with my closest friends. I find it easier to talk to not strangers, but people I don't know that well. I find it easier to talk to them about this stuff because there's no bias there. There's no expectation as to how you normally are when you're with these people.
I think as well with that's a really important point, because it shows that there is still a taboo there. I imagine you're the same as me, because I don't really talk to my friends about that deep stuff either, because there's a part of me that feels like I have this outwardly very specific person that I've been projecting my whole life, and that's the me that people like, and that version of me isn't a downer, isn't a person that needs to be what's the word, reassured, who doesn't need emotional support an awful lot. And I feel like if the sort of outward projection of me has been compromised in any way, there's a chance that my friends who I value won't want to be my friends anymore. And maybe not that black and white, and when you say it like that, it's obviously ridiculous when you say it out loud, which is probably a good reason for saying it out loud. But there is that, although, and it shouldn't be like that. It should be the other way around. The people that the friends in your life you'd think be the people that would judge you the least, and would care about you the most, and would therefore be the ideal people to talk to about things that you're struggling with. But on top of that as well, you don't want your relationships with your friends to become this kind of ultra supportive, very sort of earnest, soft talking thing, because if your people like you and I think that those hours and events and everything, the times you spend with your friends are the times where we really want to get away from sort of the storm in your own head, and you don't want to open up too much to them, because you don't want a big part of your relationship them to be, how are you doing at the moment? I would much rather, sometimes if I'm feeling like shit, have them piss around and and just be who they are around me, so I can enjoy that, and then I can deal with the other shit later. So it's a weird one, because it's a really fine line. I feel like as the men's mental health space is an area that I've sort of been involved in a fair bit as well over the last couple of years. And the big thing there is, being quiet around your friends and family, and not choosing to open up because your masculinity gets compromised or whatever. And I don't think it's really about masculinity. I think it's just more about my friendships, the type of friendships I have being compromised. They work for me. Just because I don't want to talk to my friends about them doesn't mean that I'm afraid that I'm going to get judged by them. It's that I don't want the relationship that gives me happiness to change and to be about me, and to all of a sudden be this thing that where they have to check in with me every now and again. And I don't know.
I think for me, my mental health would be worse if I couldn't go to that group of people and get the piss taken out of me.
Yeah, same. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so it's a strange one. It's a strange one, because it feels like there's some quite contrasting ideas there. Be the freedom to open up, and men can be emotionally vulnerable, and men can struggle, and it doesn't compromise your masculinity. So you need to talk to your friends. Like, well, what if those two things they don't run parallel with each other? You've kind of, there's a few ideas in that one there. And so I don't know, I suppose talking about it all a bit more kind of clears out for people. But it's just, it just goes to show that there's no silver bullet. There's no one phrase or no, one piece of advice that can work for everybody. You really have to be honest with yourself and think about what you need, because there's no right and wrong answer. The right answer is the thing that makes you happy, or that makes you feel a bit more content or accepting of those sides of yourself. Because I accept now that I'm always going to have points where I'm really low. And I think in accepting that, it makes the whole thing easier, because I don't get as frustrated with myself for feeling that way. And in order to achieve, that, if I really wanted to be kind of shameless with how I feel, and then I talk to my friends about it more often, I think. But then that, for me, that would lead to other problems, like, oh, I'm a real drag in this social group, or I feel like I can't just call. If I get in touch with that person, they're going to think that I'm having a meltdown. They might not even pick up the phone to me, or whatever. So I'm freewheeling here. I don't even know if what I'm saying is making sense right now, mate. But
I know what you mean. It's
I haven't
a
spoken
common
about it for a while.
It's a misconception, in my opinion, that to fix, or not to fix, but to improve your mental health, there's a set list of ways to do so, such as spending time with other people. For me, if I'm happy or I'm sad, I'm quite content on my own either way. A lot of people seem to think when you're feeling really low, that's when you withdraw. But for me, I can feel amazing, but I still enjoy my own company. So I think that's a misconception. Just as you say, you have to open up to everyone. You don't have to do that.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's, like I said at the start, it's just a nebulous. You can't judge anyone for how they're dealing with their problems. If you notice behaviour in someone is affecting them badly, then yeah, sure, like that's a time to question it. But you can't. I don't feel like you can question people's coping strategies if it seems to be doing them. If it seems to be working for them, So
absolutely. So before we talk about your TED Talk, which I'd quite like to go over, if they did a remake of Forrest Gump, would you be annoyed if you didn't get the call up?
You know what? I wouldn't be, because there's this guy called Rob something. I can't remember his surname. His name on Instagram is Run Robler Run, and he did. You know, in Forrest Gump, you know, where he does the running bit, and there's like a newsroom, and they've got a route around America just there, and it's only on screen for about 2 seconds. It's just like this kind of weird whale-shaped thing. This guy who's an endurance runner, obviously. Anyway, he saw that and was like, I don't know if that's actually possible, because it's like 17,000 miles and the time frame they gave it. But he thought he might be able to do it if he, say, ran 40 or 50 miles a day. So he flew out to America and he did it, and he dressed as Forrest Gump with everything, let his beard grow and everything, and he did the actual route. It was serious, man. He was going to be on my podcast. He did the actual route from Forrest Gump. And it took him, I can't remember how long it took him, but yeah, he was running like 55, 60 miles a day, you know, with full Bubba Gump shrimp hat and big beard and everything. Yeah, fucking absolute lunatic. So no, I wouldn't be annoyed if I didn't get it. I'd be annoyed if Rob didn't get it. But I get what it's saying. I only really had one Forrest Gump moment on the whole walk, actually, and that was when I got up to John O'Groats, because I literally got to the top of Britain and I ran out of land, so I just had to turn around and start coming the other way, and that was the only time I really felt Gumpish.
I just kept on running.
Yeah.
So how did the TED Talk come around? I don't know how those sort of opportunities present themselves.
Well, luckily, really, one of the people who works on TEDx Brighton is a friend of a friend who had seen me by proxy, you know, by being friends with this friend of mine. My videos and stuff that I was posting from the walk, and then had seen Mind Over Marathon and had been kind of keeping abreast of my journey. So she got in touch and asked me if I'd be interested in doing a TED Talk, which obviously is like a huge bucket list tick for anybody. So I thought, well, you know, very, very flattered, obviously. And just like spoke a little bit to her, and she said, okay, well, the curator will get in touch and just think about what your talk would be about, really. Obviously, it would be along the lines of mental health and maybe a little bit about your story, but, you know, a good TED Talk is about one specific thing, and maybe think about what yours would be about and how you do it. And so, I gave it some real thought, and it actually came at a time where I was feeling really, really not great anyway. I was in Newcastle, and a friend of mine back home had died maybe a week or two before. And obviously I couldn't be, I wasn't in Brighton, I wasn't around all my mates, and, you know, I couldn't be part of that whole sort of grieving process where we all were sort of helping each other out. You know, I called them all individually, and, you know, there's a bit of shock and all that sort of thing. But, you know, I was all of a sudden just alone in the middle of nowhere, and sort of upset about my friend, obviously, but just sort of thinking about mortality, and, you know, with no one to bounce off, I kind of ended up spiraling, and it ended in this kind of weird funk. And then when I actually got to Newcastle, I stayed with a friend of a friend, and sort of old habits crept in there, and I was sick of feeling the way I did, so I suggested we get pissed up and get some gear in, and we got on it for 3 days, and it just did me no good whatsoever. And so when I started, you know, when I eventually was like, okay, I need to fucking get out of here, and started walking again, I sort of rediscovered sort of walking and the mental space it can give you, and being in nature and stuff. And that's when I thought, okay, that's a good thing to write my TED Talk about. So, I mean, I was in a very fortunate position. You're probably wondering why my TED Talk was so good. And it's because I didn't have to work it around a job or anything like that. I was just in the middle of nowhere all day, every day, just talking into thin air and sort of writing it and rewriting it. And I just it was just what I did all day, every day while I was walking. And so I was writing it about what I was doing with no interruptions whatsoever. So obviously I pitched the idea that I'd had to the curator, Toby. and he got in touch a couple of weeks later and said, yeah, we'd love you to be involved. So I got up to Inverness and got the National Express down to Brighton, stayed there for 2 days, did the thing, and then went back and carried on with the walk. So it was very, at the time, it felt like the highest honour, you know, to actually be able to get up and talk at such a prestigious event about myself and about what I'd been through, and about something that had become a subject very close to my heart. It was it was a really, really humbling experience for sure.
Mm-hmm. So obviously it's quite hard to prepare for something like that, especially when, like you said, you weren't based in one place, even though you said that helped you. Especially with TEDx Talks, you're performing that to an audience, but the online scope of a TEDx Talk is massive. So did that sort of sit in the back of your head?
It didn't at the time, because at that point I'd already done the TV program, and I was already doing this big walk, and I was getting these offers to do things all around, and I sort of adopted this yes man mentality where I would just kind of go with everything and not say no to anything, and I just sort of went with it, which was great, because it relieved me of what it all meant, the idea of what it all meant, and being worried about the repercussions of anything. If I just seemed to have this momentum, and so I was just saying yes to things and not really thinking about it. So no, when I actually did it, I didn't think about the online thing at all, really. But obviously, since I did it, it's what is it? A couple of million views now, I believe. I don't know if I've got the figures here, but
who's counting now? Well, I mean, when you checked this morning, what was it? What was it on?
A cool 2 mil, I think. We're on at the moment.
That's it. Yeah, big time, big time.
Yeah. but I mean, as you know, it just speaks volumes about how many people, like yourself, you were in a really dark place, and you got online, and your instinct was to hear the testimony of someone else, or to there must have been a part of you that was like, I just want to hear someone else articulate what it is I'm feeling, because I haven't got a fucking clue.
Yeah, that brings me on to my next question. Actually, you had an absolute mic drop.
Continuity.
Mic drop.
Excellent.
Yeah. So you had an absolute mic drop moment where you said, what was the quote? You said, "Depression is the most inclusive club in the world, but its biggest trick is making you think you're the only member."
Yeah.
Just mind blowing. Are you still deeply involved in that club now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or have you managed to invoke your membership?
Yeah, I'm on the board now. Yeah. No, it's I stand by. That is good, isn't it?
That is bloody good.
I forgot I said that. That's brilliant.
Humble.
Yeah. That is first class, isn't it? That is the most profound thing I've ever heard. Did I really say that? Wow. No, it is something I still struggle with. Yeah. Obviously, but it feels like, it doesn't feel like I'm the only member anymore, which is nice, because that's a horrible feeling. And like I said at the start, when I did get really ill, I didn't really know what mental health and depression was. These are things I'd obviously heard of loads, but I'd sort of accepted or semi-accepted the fact that I was forever to go on this sort of weird cycle of confidence and no confidence. Like, that's what I thought I was living with. I thought there's going to be, when I was on an upswing and feeling confident, I was like a really engaging person who I liked. I liked how I was socially. I liked how how proactive I was. I was just like a kind of the correct version of myself. And then other times I would be really withdrawn and not want to talk and lose my intelligence and my ability to make decisions and stuff. And I just thought I was trapped in this kind of cycle forever, while at the same time was kind of hoping at some point I would just end up on an upswing and that would be that. And I was just having to iron out the creases. The idea that I was living with a fairly common set of mental health problems never entered my mind. I just assumed that there was this thing that I was dealing with, and I was dealing with it on my own. And so that's what, you know, that's where the idea of, you know, the revelation of realizing that everyone, you know, not everyone obviously, but a huge number of people go through their lives with this kind of weird cycle of feeling in control and then feeling like they're out of control, and really struggling with that, you know, the disparity of that was the kind of idea behind, you know, it feeling like a club where you're the only member, but there's actually this huge thing. You know, maybe it's a huge clubhouse where it's just all tiny cubicles and no one's aware that people are on either side of them. You know?
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like it's still a very big inclusive club. But I can see the other people in there now, and it's, you know, that's sad in some respects, but it's also there's a weird comfort in it as well, you know, to know that there's people going through what you're going through, and who understand, because that's feeling alone in those dark moments and those lonely moments you have is what can turn people's lights out permanently, you know, because it's a feeling that I wouldn't wish on anybody. And you hear someone else talk about something like that, like they know what you're talking about, and for some reason, I mean, you can look into that however you want. You know, human beings are pattern, you know, our brains are pattern seeking machines, and maybe it's just the fact that we like that we're hearing something that we can relate to, or maybe it's more human than that. Maybe it's like, okay, you know, I empathize with that person, so therefore I'm able to empathize with myself and forgive myself for having those feelings, because that person, they're depressed, they sound like they know what I'm going through, and I quite like them, so maybe there's a bit of that in there as well, you know. So yes, I'm still part of the club, but I don't feel like I'm the only member anymore.
Lovely
For
stuff.
sure.
Okay, so I'll begin to round this up soonish. We've been waffling for quite a while, I think. I've sort of lost track of time. I like to always finish on a bit of positivity. So, what about yourself are you most proud of at the moment?
What am I proud of?
Probably 2 million views on YouTube, but
Yeah. Yeah, we've done that. What else can I show off about? No, I'm proud. That's a really cool question. At the moment, I spent the last 4 or 5 months with my partner in Asia, and now we're back, and we're around each other all the time, and I feel like as a result, we've kind of become this one being, and we are able to provide each other with emotional support, and be there for each other and do things for each other that kind of lift each other up. So my part in that, you know, bringing her out of, you know, having the ability to bring her out of a bad feeling, and bring her out of feeling quite despondent with the current situation or life in general, or how she feels in herself, etc. It's something that I feel like I've got quite good at, and I suppose I'm quite proud of that at the moment. You know, there's nothing else going on, mate. There's nothing else happening, is there? So it's going to have to be something like that. Like, my behaviour towards the people I'm in isolation with is what I'm proud of.
I mean, it could have gone Pete Tong, but you know,
it
it
could
didn't.
have done, man.
So.
It could have, I mean, I'm proud. I'm proud I haven't murdered her.
Yeah,
I could
great
say
stuff.
that.
Have you got any other projects coming up?
Have I got any projects coming up? No, I don't think so.
More
I have a couple of ideas for I really loved running from Edinburgh to Brighton, and I loved that whole lifestyle, and I loved doing it for something. And I had this idea a little while back that I wanted to explore music and mental health, specifically, sort of alternative music. I've always been into sort of punk and metal and all that kind of thing. It's like a huge, I don't know, it's like a huge subculture that's really removed from the mainstream. And, people who don't identify, people who are non-conformist, who don't identify with a lot of mainstream culture, they have this music to fall back on, and it gives them this real sense of inclusivity and all that kind of thing. I feel like that's a really cool thing to explore, and I wanted to kind of combine that with my love for running. So I wanted to run a tour behind a band that I like, and sort of do this big running challenge. And when I was at every show, kind of talk to people there about their mental health and what the music means to them, and that kind of thing. So that's been an idea I've had for a long time now, and I actually wanted to do it this summer, but everything's fucking cancelled now, isn't it? So that might have to keep that on the back burner for now, but it's definitely something that I think I want to try and do at some point. I want to got a book coming out. Got a book.
A book.
Finished writing.
You forgot about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've written a book, and it's all about the walk and about mental health and everything. And I've just finished. Well, I mean, about a month ago, I finished it. I finished the manuscript. So it's with the publisher now. So the editor, they're going to kind of edit it a little bit, and then they're going to send it back to me. And so I'll probably do a bit of tennis for a little while until we get the right thing. And then, you know, it was supposed to be later this year that it was going to come out, but I can't really say that for sure at the moment because of what's going on. But yeah, that's something I've got coming up.
Amazing stuff. All right. Yeah. I think we'll wrap it up there. I will post Jake's social media links in the description. So, you know, you can go give him some positive vibes on there, really fulfill that need he needs for attention online, as we all do. Jake, amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the Football and Feelings podcast. Any final words?
Thank you for inviting me. It's been great fun. We haven't spoken about football once.
That's fine. I mean, it's just in the title, really. It just buys me another audience sector. Okay, pleasure. Thank you, mate.
No problem.